Alright, now we're going to be taking a look at some traditional navigation methods. Now, as mentioned in the Around the World tour, these tools are located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. The first one we're going to be taking a look at looks like a little magnifying glass. This works much like in many other programs and is called the Zoom tool. So if you left-click on it, you'll notice that it turns yellow. This is Max's way of letting you know that you've just selected it. If we now move the cursor over our viewport, you'll notice that it turns into a little magnifying glass. If you click the left mouse button and hold it down, while you're holding it, drag the mouse up and down to zoom in and out. We can also use the wheel on your mouse if you have one. Next to that, we have the Zoom All button. Now this works in the same way as the Zoom tool, but does it for all viewports at the same time. So if we click and drag in our viewport, you'll notice that all viewports update at the same time. Now the next one down the line from there is something called Zoom Extents. Zoom Extents will zoom your viewport in or out so you can see all the objects in your scene. So for example here, I can't see the entire ground plane. However, if I go and click on Zoom Extents in the lower right hand corner, I can now see everything in my scene. Now sometimes this isn't really ideal because, in this case, we can barely see the building now. There's another option here. If we look in the lower right hand corner of this button, you'll see we have a tiny little tab or tiny little mark. That lets us know that we actually have more options for that particular button. If we click and hold the left mouse button down on that icon, we get this little menu. We get a gray box and a white box. The gray box is for the entire scene. So we'll zoom in and out based on the size of your entire scene. The white one is based on your selection. So if you have a single object selected, it will zoom into that one object. For example, here you'll notice it just shifted a little bit. That's because we don't have anything selected. Now let's select something to show what this tool can actually do. So if we go to the top of the screen, you'll see a little arrow. This is your Select Object tool. If you left click on it, it turns yellow and lets you know it's active. If we now move the cursor over the side of the building and left click with the mouse, we should get this white border. Now if we go back to our Zoom Extents tool and click on it, you'll notice that we zoom right into the building and right into the side that we selected. If I now left click on, say, one of the windows, I can now click Zoom Extents and zoom right into there. Now I almost always have this tool set to white. And the reason for that is because if we don't have anything selected, and I now click on the Zoom Extents, it will do it for the entire scene. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Now the next one down the line is the same as Zoom Extents, but it does it for all viewports at the same time. So if we click on it, you see that all views get adjusted. And here, let me just zoom in again to show really quick what happens. All the views are zoomed in. I click on Zoom Extents All, they all pull back. This one also has a little tab. So if we click and hold the left mouse button down, you see we have gray and white options as well. Again, I almost always have it set to white because if you know how it works, you can actually get the functionality of both. So here we select one object and then we click on it and it fills all 4 viewports. Now the next one that we're going to be taking a look at is called the Maximize Viewport toggle. It is right underneath the Zoom Extents All button. Now what this will do is it'll take your current viewport, or the viewport with the yellow border around it, and have it fill the entire screen. So if we click on that once, you'll notice that it took our current viewport and had it fill the screen. Now if we click on it again, it'll take us right back. Now if you like, you can actually do this through a hotkey, Alt-W. So we can keep on pressing Alt-W to jump back and forth. Now as already mentioned, the Zoom tool can be used with the mouse wheel. The Zoom Extents can actually be used with the Z key on the keyboard. And now we have the Maximize tool, or the Maximize Viewport option, which can be done with Alt-W. Now the next one down from there is called Arc Rotate. Now I highly recommend that you're actually in perspective view when using Arc Rotate, especially at the beginning, because if you use it in one of these orthographic views, meaning the front, top, or left view, it can get a little jarring and a little bit weird, a little bit confusing when you're first getting started with this stuff. So let's make sure we're in the perspective viewport by left-clicking in it. And we now activate the Arc Rotate button. It will bring up this circle with boxes at each of the extents. If we move the cursor to the center of the circle and click and drag, you'll notice that we rotate around. If we move the cursor over one of the boxes and click and drag, we can only rotate in that particular direction. Same holds true for the other set of boxes. Now, if we click and drag outside of the circle, we roll our camera. Now, much like with the Zoom Extents buttons, we can actually specify what we want to rotate around. Right now, it's rotating around the scene. So say, for example, I end up using my zoom tool to get in a little bit closer here. And I start to rotate around. It's now rotating around what I'm looking at there. However, if I click and hold the left mouse button down and go to white, it will now rotate around what I have selected. Well, what do I have selected? Let's zoom out a little bit. And you'll see I have that window selected. So it's now rotating around that location. So that can actually be very useful, especially if you're zoomed in very close and you want to get a nice clear look at it. Now the hotkey for this one is holding down Alt on the keyboard and pressing the middle mouse button down. Now your middle mouse button is the same as your wheel. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down Alt, press down the mouse wheel, and then start to drag the mouse around. And now rotate. Now it actually uses whatever mode you have set down here in the lower right hand corner. Same holds true for the Zoom Extents. So if these were set to scene, meaning the gray box, and we hit Z, then it would zoom the entire scene out. Now the next one down the line is a hand tool. Now the hand tool is basically a pan. If we activate the hand and we just click and drag in our viewport, we can easily pan our scene around. And this works equally well in all viewports. And then finally for here, we have the field of view option. It looks like a little triangle in there. And what this does is it actually messes with the perspective view's field of view. You'll notice that as I bring it way out, it distorts the image or distorts the viewport. And that's because it's acting much like a field of view on a camera. Whereas if you go to one extreme, you end up getting kind of like a fisheye effect. And if you go to the other extreme, you get kind of like a telephoto lens effect. Now, if you really want accurate telephoto or fisheye and so forth, you want to use a real camera or a digital camera in this case. You do not want to be using this field of view very often. If you want to zoom into something in your scene, instead of using the field of view, you should really be using the zoom tool instead, okay? Because that is not going to mess with the field of view too much. Now let's take a look at the orthographic views. Now if I switch over to an orthographic view by left-clicking on the name, you'll notice that in the lower left-hand corner, that icon changed. These icons are context sensitive, meaning that if you have an orthographic view selected, your options down here are very different from those of the perspective window. Those, in turn, are different from a camera's controls. So if you don't see the tool that you're expecting, double check to see what kind of viewport you actually have selected at the time. Now, in an orthographic view, all of these work the same way. So if we click on Arc Rotate, you'll see we can still rotate around just fine. But you'll notice the building's looking a little weird here. That's because we do not have perspective in this view. Now, say you ended up rotating your view and you want to get back to, say, the top view or the front view or whatever this was before. What we can do is we can right-click on the viewport's name at the top left of the viewport. And at the very top, we have a menu called Views, and these are all the views that you can choose from. In this case, it was originally the front view, so we're going to go back to it. Now you'll notice that we're actually not seeing a whole lot here. We can't see our building. Often when you set the view, you need to zoom out. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to use Zoom Extents, and then we're just going to back up a little bit.